The Washington, D.C. Court of Appeals has now authorized civil lawsuits against Trump. And we've already played this game before. You remember when New York passed that weird law that allowed Miss Bergdorf to file that lawsuit against Trump saying she got Bergdorfed in the Bergdorf dressing room? Well, similar type of thing. Okay, Trump has obviously been charged with a number of crimes in the January 6th aftermath. But now, what about civil lawsuits? What about a lot of the other Bergdorfs who want to get their Bergdorf on? Well, the Court of Appeals says that Trump and the litigation against him is allowed to go forward, that this is not going to be dismissed outright. This comes down from an appeal Trump had submitted. We're going to get into it before we hear about Mike Johnson from Liz Cheney, who's selling books saying that Johnson's a collaborator in all this. And this opens the question, does this make civil lawsuits against all of our government officials allowed? Can we just start suing them for misconduct now? I mean, the whole world is changing on the back of Donald Trump. They're really shattering a lot of precedent here. And let's see what's happening out of the DC Court of Appeals. You can see this one dropped 1201. It's a 67-pager. We'll hit the highlights on it. It's the United States Court of Appeals. You can tell that from the fancy lettering there. And it says here, from the District of Columbia out of Washington, D.C., Donald Trump is the appellant, right? He is appealing this from a lower level ruling. And the appellees are James Blassingame and Sidney Hempy suing Donald Trump. Now, this is on appeal from the U.S. District Court, and that's where a lot of these other cases are going. It looks like 3 different case numbers all filed against Trump. Let's see who is here. There were oral arguments on this case. You can see the court's telling us everybody was here, and here is the opinion. Now, they're telling us about presidential immunity and civil damages. Okay, Trump is already being prosecuted criminally, but what about civilly? Same story. Says here, the judge's name is Srinivasan. Says, since the Supreme Court's decision in Nixon versus Fitzgerald, which is what granted presidential immunity for civil cases, presidents have carried out their official responsibilities free from any exposure to civil damages liability. That was the old rule. President is immune. Nixon, the case, established that a president's absolute immunity from civil damage is predicated on his official acts. Okay? Presidential immunity applied to Nixon. The object of a president's official act immunity is to assure that he can fearlessly and impartially discharge the singularly weighty duties of his office. And so you can already see where this is going to go, right? The official act immunity. So they're just going to carve out a little exception and say Trump is not official act immunity. That's insurrection immunity. Oh, okay. You don't have that. The president, though, does not spend every minute of every day exercising his official responsibilities, especially when you're insurrecting. And when he acts outside the functions of his office, he does not continue to enjoy immunity from damages liability just because he happens to be the president. And says the Supreme Court has made clear about that. The president's official act immunity, by nature, does not extend to his unofficial actions. We learned that in Clinton versus Jones. And when he acts in unofficial private capacity, he is subject to civil suits just like any private citizen. So now we know where this is going. What's going to happen with Trump? This appeal calls for us to apply those key decisional precedents on presidential immunity to a decidedly unprecedented event involving the presidency. The riot at the Capitol. It's interesting they call it a riot, right? Not the insurrection. Okay, this is not Judge Chutkan writing. This is the Court of Appeals. The riot at the Capitol, just as Congress convened to tabulate the vote. Plaintiffs in the cases before us are Capitol police officers. Those people are cops who are suing Trump, and members of Congress who were at the Capitol that day. So I think, is Stinky Eric Swalwell a part of this? I didn't see his name at the header, but he might be one of those other sub cases that's being consolidated. He probably has a broken heart from his long lost love when he was making Bang Bang with Fang Fang, the Chinese spy, stinking up the whole Capitol building there on January 6th. And now he's suing. All right, so they seek civil damages for harms that they allege they suffered arising from the riot, just like Bergdorf got Bergdorfed in the dressing room. Got it. So although they sue various persons, the sole defendant named in all the cases are Trump. The plaintiffs here, these cops and the Congress people, they contend that during Trump's final months in office, he conspired with political allies to get a second term despite a defeat. He allegedly advanced that cause before J6 by repeatedly making false claims that the election might be and then had been stolen. Filed meritless lawsuits challenging the election. He's like, what are you talking about? We just read here the recent 2023 opinion about a 2018 case involving Georgia and election fraud and how corrupt and broken their systems are. So the lawsuits were meritful, I would say. They just didn't get litigated appropriately because of election deadlines. And then it becomes moot at that point. So those efforts allegedly culminated in a 75-minute speech. Trump delivered that speech on January 6th, which is now illegal to say things. According to the plaintiffs, Trump's actions, and this is civilly, sparked the ensuing riot at the Capitol. And all of these civil lawsuits are death by 1,000 cuts. Okay, it takes campaign money, it takes time, it takes legal RPMs all right, how much brain power needs to go in to defending against this onslaught of never-ending lawfare. It is incredibly expensive, not only in terms of money, which you might just write off, but in terms of capacity and energy. It takes a lot. All of that could be generated to get out the vote, to go out and cut new commercials, to go rally, right? All the things. But this is by design to bleed off campaign resources. And it's working, I'm sure. President Trump moved in the district court to dismiss the claims against him, including on the grounds of a president official immunity from damages. Okay, so they sue Trump. Trump moves to dismiss the case. The court denies the motion to dismiss, says you don't have civil immunity, and the case is now on appeal. The district court rejected the claims of immunity and Trump appeals. The sole issue before us is, can Trump, whether he has demonstrated an entitlement to official act immunity for his actions on J6? Chutkan said he doesn't have presidential immunity for crimes. Let's see what this judge says in the Court of Appeals. Says we answer no, at least at this stage of the proceedings. Says we're not going to allow Trump to dismiss this right now. When a first-term president opts to seek a second term, his campaign win re-election is not an official presidential act. Okay, so Trump campaigning to win re-election is not an official presidential act. Now, my response to this, but I would also say that you could disambiguate that. So now we're asking about the speech. Okay, was the speech an official presidential act, or was the speech at the rally a non-presidential act? They say it is a non-presidential act and not subject to the protections of immunity. Why? Because he was talking about winning a re-election. I would also argue two things can be true at the same time. He was also doing his duty as the executive, as the president of this country, as the chief executive of the executive branch, to ensure that we do not have rigged elections. So by being there and by using the legal mechanisms around him, that was two things. It was Trump running for re-election and trying to win again, obviously, which is fine. You're allowed to do that. And you were until you got charged with crimes for that. Every other Democrat was allowed to do that, except Trump's not recently. But it's bigger than that, right? It's also about ensuring the integrity of elections, because he is the chief executive. And we know that the elections were rigged top to bottom, and they're finally starting to admit it. You can even talk about it now, which is fun. So here, the office of the presidency as an institution is agnostic about who's going to occupy it next. So campaigning to gain that office is not an official act of the office. I would say another thing is true. Speaking to ensure that the rightful holder of the office is an official act of the office. The president should ensure that we have fair elections and that it is not rigged, and that if there is a contest about that, it is appropriately litigated. So we want the due holder to be there. So when a sitting president running for a second term attends a private fundraiser for his re-election effort, or hires or fires campaign staff, or cuts a political ad supporting his candidacy, or speaks at a campaign rally funded and organized by his campaign committee, he's not carrying out the official duties of the presidency. He's acting as an office seeker, not an office holder. No less than are the persons running against him when they take precisely the same actions in their competing campaigns to attain precisely the same office. Okay, but Trump wasn't indicted for those things. Okay, that's not what Trump did. Trump did not get indicted for hiring or firing people. Okay, he got indicted for executing the actual office, which is to ensure that we have free and fair elections. That is his duty. The people on the other side of that, they don't have that same duty because they're not office holders. They're not in the office. So you're mixing things here. One is the president, the other is not. The president has an obligation to ensure the country runs appropriately simultaneously with his re-election campaign. That former is protected, or should be. President Trump himself recognized that he engaged in his campaign to win re-election. That's good because he was running it. That's neat. Including his post-election efforts to alter their declared votes in his favor, or to, let's say, confirm the rightful results. In his personal capacity as a presidential candidate, not in his official capacity as sitting president. They say he said the same thing. That is evident in his effort to intervene in the Supreme Court's consideration of a post-election lawsuit challenging the administration. So he says he filed this document, and we're going to reference this document to show why Trump even thinks that he doesn't have this. He expressly filed the motion in the Supreme Court, quote, in his personal capacity as candidate for re-election to the office of the presidency. Okay, he says rather than in his official capacity as sitting president, but I really don't know what that has to do with the January 6th speech, which is the subject of the indictment. So some things, okay, the January 6th speech caused the January 6th actions that harmed the plaintiffs. Trump is being sued for some sort of a damage. So we got to go back to the damages. This is a civil claim. So Trump did something, which was the speech, which caused January 6th, which caused damages for the petitioners. Okay. So the speech was given in a dual capacity, personal capacity as a candidate and presidential capacity to make sure the elections are not rigged. That is very different than filing a claim about fraud in the Supreme Court. Like, this is a non sequitur. What are we even talking about this for? So somewhere else, Trump claimed that he was operating in election challenges separate and apart from what happened on that's even a part of this case. So they're just picking something, right? This is literally cherry picking from another Trump filing and saying, oh, in that lawsuit, you said that personal over there, so we're going to consider it personal here. He grounded his claim right to intervene in that case in his unique and substantial personal interest. So this is all just, they just cherry picked it right out. I don't know what that case has to do with the harm that's alleged in this lawsuit. Now, in arguing that he's entitled to official act immunity now we get back to this case, Trump does not dispute that he engaged in his alleged actions up into on January 6th as a candidate, which is true, but he thinks that that does not matter. No, he also thinks that there was an executive function. Rather, in his view, a president's speech on public matters of public concern is invariably an official function. Of course, he's the president. That's what all they do is give speeches, like all the time. That's it. They just say things. That's all they do. So he says, in his view, the speech on matters of public concerns invariably an official function, and he was engaged in that function on J6 and the lead up to that day. But they say, nope, we can't accept that rationale. While presidents are often exercising official duties when they speak on matters of public concern, that is not always the case. When a sitting president running for re-election speaks in a campaign ad or accepting his political party's nomination, he typically speaks on matters of public concern. Again, that's accepting a nomination at a party convention, okay? They're not even addressing the other part of what Trump was talking about. Trump was speaking about two things. Yes, him winning the presidency, but also having the rightful holder of the office in the presidency. And that second part of that, having the rightful holder, that's not a subject that you get when you get nominated at a party convention, okay? That's different. When you cut a campaign ad, that's not the same thing. So they're trying to say that Trump was just basically doing purely campaign stuff when that's not true. He was the president. Yet he does so in an unofficial private capacity holder, an office seeker. I don't even argue with that. I would agree, but that's not what Trump was doing. So why are you giving us those examples? And actions taken in an unofficial capacity cannot qualify for official act immunity. Great. So while we thus reject Trump's argument for official act immunity at this stage, the result is necessarily tied to the need to assume the truth of the cops, the J6, Capitol Hill cops, factual allegations at this point in the proceeding. And so Trump has not had a chance to counter those allegations with facts. And so when these cases move forward in district court, Trump must be afforded the opportunity to develop his own facts on the immunity question if he desires to show that he took the actions alleged in the complaint as a president rather than as a candidate. So this case can move forward. We're going to litigate over the official capacity versus non-official capacity later. But Trump's motion to dismiss this case is not going to survive. They're going to send it back down and they're going to say, continue on with your litigation. At this time, it's going back down to the lower court, but when appropriate, Trump can then later move for summary judgment on his claim of official act immunity. So in other words, Trump hasn't established that this was official act yet. Okay. So because our decision is not necessarily even the final word on the issue of presidential immunity, okay, that's some hedging right there. That does not sound like Chutkan, right? Chutkan is like, this is the standard. The Constitution says nevertheless, and nevertheless means do whatever the hell we want. We, of course, express no view on the ultimate merits of the claims against Trump, nor do we have any occasion to address his other defenses, including his claim that his alleged action fall within the First Amendment, because they did not amount to incitement of imminent lawless action. He did not seek appellate review of that at this time, but he will. But he could bring that issue before us in the future, which he will. They're working on that right now. So the motion to dismiss denial from Chutkan that we got on December 1st is going to be appealed, no doubt. Now, we also do not opine on whether the executive or other privileges might shield certain evidence from discovery or other use as litigation proceeds, nor does our decision on presidential official immunity determine whether or when he might be immune from criminal prosecution, right? So that's the other, Chutkan just ruled on that. So that issue will now also go up to the Court of Appeals. They say instead, we only hold that here in this civil case, taking the allegations from the cops and the Congress people as true, we must at this point in this proceeding, we must demonstrate that President Trump has not demonstrated an entitlement to the dismissal of the claims right now. In the proceedings ahead in district court, Trump will have the opportunity to show that his alleged actions in the run-up were done in his official capacity as president rather than his unofficial capacity as a presidential candidate. And so that is the ruling from the Court of Appeals. You can see this one came out of the DC Circuit, and it's saying that as to the civil claims brought by these people, James Blossingame, Sidney Hempy, and the other allegedly Congress people and other officers who were there, former White House DOJ officials were there, diplomats, and others. Okay, so that's the ruling out out of the Court of Appeals. So Trump right now is going to face ongoing litigation, right? And I get concerned about this because once you open Pandora's box on this, there's a lot of J6 cops there, a lot of Metro PD, a lot of Capitol Hill PD, a lot of other people in the Washington area that might have claims and might have opportunity and a lot of money being thrown at them to go and file a lawsuit against Trump, just like they've done in many other jurisdictions. And is it going to stop there? Are they going to just stop at Trump? Or maybe they'll just sue everybody in Congress. Maybe we can sue people in Congress if this is going to be the new standard. We'll have to wait and see. But here is Liz Cheney saying that, yeah, even Speaker Johnson is a co-conspirator. House Speaker Mike Johnson says that he's a collaborator with Trump. Maybe they're going to get him too. Liz Cheney's really on one lately. Here she is.
If you look at what Donald Trump is trying to do, he can't do it by himself. He has to have collaborators. And the story of Mike Johnson is the story of a collaborator and of someone who knew then and knows now that what he's doing and saying is wrong, but he's willing to do it in an effort to please Donald Trump. That's what makes it dangerous.
The Speaker of the House is a collaborator to overthrow the last election.
Absolutely.
Okay, so that's the new standard right now. Everybody who is not anti-Trump is a collaborator with Trump and an insurrectionist who's going to seize America. So that is what we have on that one, my friends. Now, Donald Trump, this case will go back down to the lower level court. The litigation will continue. We will turn around and see if Donald Trump will have enough now to declare that he was operating within the official duties, the official capacity of the role of the president, which I think he absolutely was. As the chief executive, we want to make sure our elections are proper. And then will that carry over at the Court of Appeals on the other criminal prosecution? And ultimately, what is the Supreme Court going to say about it? So it is going to be a lot of fun to continue to cover this, my friends. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for checking out robertgovea.com. If you want to read any of the PDF documents, all the red lines are uploaded there. We also have a daily newsletter. We'd love it if you signed up for that. We'd also love a subscribe here, wherever it is you're watching it, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the next one.